I was just running as fast as I could, and this thing was behind me.
I've got two really scary Dogman encounters for you. First up on the show was Davis, and when Davis was just a kid, he was out with his friends in Utah, and they got chased by a Dogman creature. And when they ran up onto the parking lot of a church, this thing stopped, but he really goes into some pretty heavy detail about what happened that night. Turn around, got a pretty decent look at this thing and some theories of what he thinks these things are. Also, some different stuff that happened in the area. Really scary encounter. And then we're going to talk to a lady who actually got an up close personal look at one of these creatures. This thing was chasing her down the road and looked inside of her car and actually grinned at her. She saw its eyes, its teeth. She talks about every bit of that. Some really scary stuff and a very emotional encounter that she's going to talk about. But before we get into any of it, I just want to say thanks for being here tonight. If you've got an encounter you would like to send me, you can send it to me by email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. But let's jump right into the stories.
So I guess this happened. I want to say like 14 or 15, mid-teens somewhere. And it was here in Utah. If you've ever heard of a teeny fly speck town called Grantsville, a lot of stuff happened to me there. But this one was the most serious one. So me and one of my buddies, we we weren't really drinkers, we weren't smokers, we didn't do any of that recreational stuff. And in a tiny town that your biggest thing is a ma and pa's grocery store, you got to figure out how to kind of entertain yourself. So we did what it seems like a lot of teens tend to do. We decided exploring the darkness out around midnight would be a great thing to do to keep ourselves safe, or not safe, entertained, not safe. um, and we were often exploring all these fields and things. If to kind of give you an idea, if you've ever seen a desert that's trying not to be a desert, like all the sagebrush, maybe a scraggly tree. That's kind of the landscape out there. Um, and one night, me and this one friend, we had gone out together a lot. We're out looking for stuff to kind of give us a scare, but we invited two other guys with us that didn't typically come with us. So we're heading out towards the edge of town, and right there on the edge of town, there's this church sitting there, and then it's the fields, and they go on for miles and miles and miles. And this church, like I said, right there on the edge, there's like three white vinyl fences around the parking lot of the church. So there's just one way to get into the parking lot from the street, and like 6 feet tall, just your average vinyl fences. I say that because it kind of matters later. But I so we go past this church, we're going out into these fields, and by the time we get maybe a quarter mile or so out into the sagebrush, I started noticing something in the bushes kind of stalking us. I mean, it was past midnight, it was pretty dark. It wasn't definitely not a full moon, so it wasn't real bright. And so I saw something in the bushes kind of following us, like stalking us through the sagebrush. And from what I could tell, it was pretty large, like at least bear size, maybe bigger. It's a little bit of hard to tell, but it's kind of stalking us through the sagebrush. And I point that out to my buddies. The one that normally would go out with me immediately, he's kind of on alert, like okay, where is it? Where is it? Because we've run into a couple other things together. But the other two guys that we brought, they're just like, no, there's nothing out here. Stop messing with us. Kind of like teens do. Um, and so we're like, okay, well, then the best idea is to keep going, right? Of course. So we keep going further out into the sagebrush. And the whole time, this thing is just kind of keeping pace with us, just following us. And I pointed out a couple more times as we're getting further out there. And finally, when we're probably half a mile or so out into the field, out into the sagebrush in the dark, the other two guys are like, okay, there is nothing out here. well, we should probably go back. And yeah, sure. That's what me and my one friend wanted, so we didn't tease him about it. But we start heading back, and this thing is still following us. We get probably a couple hundred yards away from the edge of town where that church is. And I must have just been kind of walking slower, watching whatever it was, because I noticed all of them were getting back to the church, and I was still several hundred feet, like 100 yards ish out into the field by myself now at this point. And I was just kind of watching this thing, kind of doing that like horror movie thing where you're just watching something potentially very dangerous coming towards you. And I'm just kind of watching it slowly stalk closer to me. And I happened to be kind of holding a stick that I just, hit weeds with it. And I thought it'd be a great idea to kind of just chuck my stick at it. So I did. I chucked my stick at this, whatever it was. Like I said, it at the point, it just looked like a big shadow. Couldn't really make out detail with how dark it was, but I just chucked my stick at it and then I started booking it. And I'm not, it's kind of hard to remember if I actually heard it or I just felt it coming after me. And I was just running as fast as I could, potentially for my life. I wasn't sure at that point, but I was just running as fast as I could. And this thing it was behind me. I could feel it. And as I was getting closer to the church, just about to get there, I don't know if you've ever had that feeling where it's like someone's about to touch you and you can almost sense it like just a second before they actually touch you. So I had that feeling like it was just about to have me. And I thought I was done for. It's like, this is it. Whatever this thing is, I'm done for. And then right at that moment, I stumbled onto the church parking lot and into the light. And the feeling, the sound, whatever was totally gone. So I'm just kind of looking around. I turn around and look to see if I can see it because it was right there. I know for sure it was right there, right behind me, right before I got to the church parking lot. And I couldn't see it anywhere, so I just started making a wider scan. Like there's no way it could have just vanished. It was there. It had been there for like half an hour. It couldn't just vanish. Um, and as I was kind of scanning around, I saw on the far side of the parking lot, on the field side of the fence, there was something standing there, like chest and shoulders above these white vinyl fences. So they're like 6-ish feet tall, just those normal white vinyl fences. So if it was standing like chest and shoulders above, it had to have been like 8-9 feet maybe. I don't know, just really, really, really big. And my first thought when I looked over there was, "Oh, it's probably just, it's my imagination. There's nothing actually over there." But looking at it, just simply looking at it gave me that feeling you get when you wake up from a nightmare, just that, like, evil, feeling you get just right as you wake up from a nightmare, that terror, that evilness, whatever it is. Simply looking in that direction made me feel that. So I really think there was something over there. I can't guarantee what it was. I kind of want to say it was some kind of canine just because of other experiences. So maybe a dog man, but I can't say for sure because I didn't see a lot of detail. I more just saw the outline of it. And something that was really interesting though to me, like it felt evil. It felt, like I said, nightmarish, but it would not come around the church. Like for whatever reason, it would not step onto the church grounds. And it just kind of made me think maybe that old those tropes you see in movies where it's like holy ground, the evil things won't come on them. Maybe there's some truth to that. And yeah, I mean, at that point, we just kind of we hang out there for a little bit. We're a little creeped out. Me and my one friend saw it. The other two either didn't or they were denying it. Either way, and before long, we kind of just made sure to stay in the light and went home. But yeah, that was kind of the experience. So
To me, it's kind of crazy some of the things and situations we get ourselves put into when we're kids, right? Like we do things when we're kids we never do today. Like I guarantee you wouldn't be throwing a stick at that thing if that had happened to you today, man. And that's really scary. And I know there's a lot to go through there, but what made you think it was a dog, man? And I know that you probably have some other experiences to talk about, but that point in time, what is it that made you feel that way?
um so like I said, I'm not positive. Like I couldn't confirm that it was. Um but me and my friends, we had had lots of just brief little experiences outside of this one. Like I said, this was a very serious one. But we had lots of little brief things where we caught glimpses of things as we were out and about, sometimes even at the day, like in the distance. So a couple things, I guess one of the biggest things, I wish my picture actually went missing of this because I had it on like an old Polaroid and it was just like the ones that's come out. I had a picture of this, and I left it at one of my houses when I moved, and that was dumb. But I we found a couple things that were really interesting. So first off, we would randomly find just like full grown cows, kind of tore apart, just as we're out exploring. And yeah, I guess other stuff could do that. But we're kind of in the middle of the valley there. So we didn't really have any big things come down from the mountains unless we got closer. Like there's probably 20 to 40 miles between us and the starting of the actual mountains. So there wasn't like a lot of big predators that could tear up a cow, I wouldn't think. I could be wrong, but like it's like we found stuff like that. Two things that were super weird that we found. Again, I guess these one of these at least could be done by other stuff. One of them we found there was a place we liked to hang out. It was like one of those scraggly trees out in the sagebrush area, and we like to hang out there every so often. One day we went there and we found, I don't even know what it was, honestly. To me, it almost looked like a compy, like those little raptors. Like I don't know what else it was, but it was just completely perfectly skinned. Like no blemishes. It looked like it just got perfectly skinned and left right there in the place that we like to hang out. That was really interesting. And close to that area, we also found this head. And so this head, it was probably the most interesting thing I saw, like physically saw, not thought I saw. It was at least the size of a horse head, but it was like a canine. It had sharp teeth, it had the fur, and I can't say that was like the head of a dog man, but I don't know of any canines that have a head bigger than a horse head. And even if it wasn't, like, it really made us wonder, like, okay, if there's literally just this head of this gigantic canine, maybe it was some overgrown canine that shouldn't be there, but it was. What got the rest of the body? Because there was only the head there. And that was kind of some things we ran into, and, like, we would see, like I said, things at like, at distance, and just I just got the sense, like I said, I can't prove any of it. I kinda just got, like, the sense that these were, like, looking at all the different stories of the different cryptids and things, like, I feel like they were more Dogman like, especially because they always felt just downright evil. Like, I never felt good when I saw these things, and it seems like that's kind of a thing that goes with them. Like, some of the other ones, it's like you feel more neutral or you kinda don't feel bad about it, but it's like, I don't know, they feel different somehow. And that's kinda why I'm thinking it was.
I would say, man, like with all those things and the experiences you had leading up to that, man, you definitely saw a dog man, especially with the amount of fear that you felt and the fact that it wouldn't go on the church grounds. I mean, to me, those are like, because Bigfoot, you can kind of go back and forth, and I think maybe sometimes Bigfoot can be evil and sometimes they're not. But with Dogman, I think they're just pure evil. I don't think there's a left or right with those things. They're just they're fear eaters. That's what they do. They try to make people afraid, and I've never heard of a good Dogman encounter, right? So I think you're definitely spot on with that. When you were running from this thing and you felt it kind of back there, at what point in time did you know that you were going to be okay?
When I stumbled onto the church parking lot, that's like right before I got it there, I thought I was done for. And yeah, maybe that was just like adrenaline teenage brain, but I just like there was a lot of fear there, and like feeling like I was about to be grabbed. I thought I was done for. I didn't have any type of relief until I saw that whatever was out there wouldn't come onto the church grounds. That's where I felt a bit of relief. Still pretty scared, but like some type of relief then. But that's it. Not at all out in the field.
I don't blame you one bit. That's that's one of the scariest encounters I think I've ever heard, and obviously it impacted your life. But just how did that encounter impact you as a young kid?
I wasn't smart enough to totally not go out at night after that, but it did it did scare me quite a bit. Like, I don't know if it was on the recording or not, but a little before I mentioned there was one night I remember just kinda laying next to my mom as she's going to sleep and just telling her that I am done seeing things out there. I don't wanna see anything else. I even was, like, crying a little bit, which pretty embarrassing for, like, a teenager to do that. Um, so at the time, it really, really, really scary. Now, I'm more, I guess, cautious. Like, I always go out, I'm carrying bear spray, knives, something just to make sure I have something with me. And but yeah, really impacted me younger. Now, it just kinda has made me a little more cautious of being out, especially at night. Like, personally, I kind of want, which is very strange to say with how it impacted me, I kind of feel drawn to, like, I want to see something again, maybe see more clearly. Um, but at the same time, I'm not purposely going out in the middle of the night to see those, because the way I see it is, so I'm a churchy guy. I'm all about religion. I think God looks out for us. But if I purposely put myself where I know something is probably going to go wrong, I don't know how how much God will look out for me. He may take some pity on me. But if I'm purposely going out and looking for dangerous things, he might be like, "Come on, I really." So I do want to kind of see something again, but I don't do anything that's stupid, I guess, because I am more
I
cautious.
mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I obviously I understand why you're cautious. I tell people all the time, be careful what you ask for, because with these creatures, especially Dogman, they seem to follow people around. I know that there's one guy's been on my show that, hey, I think he moved 10 or 14 times because this creature just kept following him, and really, really, really terrified him. And they're different. Dogman's different. And these encounters are very, very strange. And I'm like you, faith is super important to me. And I think God's always there, man. I think he's going to protect you, whether you do something stupid or not, because we're human. But, going back to this encounter, when you were at the church and you were looking back and you saw this thing, I know you kind of described the height, but was there any other details that you were able to get?
Because, like I said, I pretty much just saw the silhouette. So, I mean, it looked more humanoid. Like, it had shoulders, it had arms, it had a head. Like, it was more humanoid looking, but I didn't really get much more than an outline. So I can't say I saw like ears or anything like that. So
Well, I mean, that's enough to see a silhouette of something like that standing there looking at you. It's really interesting to me that it would not go any further, that it stopped right there. When you were looking at this thing, you said that you could feel fear, you felt like it had been there watching you for a while before you had that encounter?
I would say I never got I never saw, like, close or anything, but we did catch, like, glimpses of things as we're out exploring, so I don't think it ever necessarily got close enough that I would say I felt super watched. Every once in a while, we would walk into an area in the fields where it just felt very off, like we shouldn't be walking around there, something's off, but until then, I'm not sure if it was actually watching us or not. I couldn't say for certain. It's definitely possible.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that it'd probably been watching you for a while if I just, just guessing based on all the stuff you're telling me and the evidence that's around there. How far away was the head that you found from where you had your encounter?
Um, Probably so it was on the other end of the neighborhood. It's probably like a quarter mile, not very far away.
No, man, that's really, really close. Yeah, I'd say that's probably all related. I've never seen anything like that. I've had Bigfoot encounters, but I've never seen a dog man. I don't know that I want to, man. I've sit in this chair and heard so many of these dogman encounters that just rattle people. And it's one of those things, if you know these things are out there, I know for me personally, I won't go off in the woods anymore, not the deep woods anyways, just because knowing these things are out there. But man, I just am really curious to know your opinion because nobody really knows, but what do you think these things are?
So I actually I don't know if this theory is correct or not, so don't get mad at me. But I do have I've thought about it quite a bit, and something I've kind of thought about that it makes sense in my head. Whether it's right or not, I don't know, but it makes sense in my head is so like I said, I'm kind of a churchy dude, so like I'm going a little biblical here. Um, I When you go back to Moses, for example, so the priests and Moses, they turned sticks into snakes, right? It's like these inanimate objects they turned into snakes. Um, so if someone could do that with power of the devil, like the sorcerers of this pharaoh, I'm sure they were using the power of the devil there. If if they could do that to a stick, then I think he could people who serve the devil, they could probably have their appearance changed too. And that's kind of my thought is I think they're either the ones that kind of just more scare are probably just like evil spirits is my thinking. And the ones that maybe can be more physical, those are actually maybe people who just have kind of sold away some important stuff to the devil to kind of let him change them.
Man, that's a very interesting theory, and it makes a lot of sense. I look at everything through a biblical lens. I really do. And if you look at all the stuff that happened back in Moses' day and the things that they did, I mean, there's just so much in God's universe we don't understand. So I don't write anything off. Like I think these things are maybe a fallen angel. I think fallen angels can be shapeshifters. I know that sounds so strange coming out of your mouth as a believer, but I really do think that that's a possibility. And so whatever these things are, they can't be good. And I think you're really fortunate that night that you made it to that church parking lot and you're able to sit here today and to share that encounter. If there's somebody listening to this episode tonight and they're kind of on the fence whether they believe in these things or not, what would you say to them?
A hard question because it's like I've experienced it, but even for me, it is a little hard to. I don't disbelieve it at all. I'll put that out. I think any of these things people see could be true. I guess someone who doesn't really believe, I wouldn't necessarily say, "Hey, you have to believe," but I would just say maybe just be a little careful so you don't have to find out. Because there's a big difference if you go out looking for it because you tend to find the things you're looking for eventually one way or another. So if you don't believe, that's fine. Maybe just be careful. Even if it's you don't think it's real, just be careful. so you don't have to find out.
That's some good, solid advice, man. A lot of times, the biggest skeptics turn into the biggest believers because they have these, unfortunate experiences that change their life. Because these things are life changing. I talk to, tons of people all the time now, and they've had these encounters that just change the whole direction of their life. And I think that it's, a hard thing to come forward and talk about. And also, too, man, I got to give you props for being able to go out into the woods and go into caves and all the things you were telling me that you like to do still. Because, man, there's a lot of people that have these encounters and they're done. They just can't go in the woods anymore. They can't hunt anymore. But, man, it takes a lot of guts to do that. And it takes a lot of guts to come forward. So I really appreciate you, man, coming forward and sharing that encounter.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the way I look at it, again, going, I am such a churchy. That's where I sit. The way I see it is, if you're not purposely putting yourself where you know something is going to be dangerous, the Lord's going to look out for you. As long, I mean, unless you're purposely trying to push God away from you, then maybe He won't as readily, because you don't want Him there. But like me, I'm not really scared of it, because I know that as long as I'm kind of right with the big guy up there, He's gonna look out for me, because evil things just, they can't stand Him. So as long as I'm not purposely being stupid and putting myself somewhere where I more or less know something bad is going to happen, He's going to look out for me. So that's kind of why I don't really worry too much.
Good stuff, man. I agree. It's a smart way to look at it.
Encounter number 2.
So the first encounter that I had was back in it was November of 2016. I was a newly single mom. I had my 2 little kids in the backseat of my car. They were 1.5 and 2.5. It's 11:30 at night, and I'm driving home, and I came to intersection of 2 county roads. The one I was on was asphalt, the other one was asphalt, and then you could go straight across to gravel. On one side, there's a little white church, and across the road from it is the cemetery of the guy that founded the church, his family members, and some other people. Well, when I was turning to go south, the headlights of the car hit all of the pine trees that lined the back of the cemetery, and I saw this thing just running on 2 legs. It was darker than the night, so I could see it, and I wasn't speeding. I mean, I just turned from the intersection, and I watched it run all the way up out of the ditch. And when it was going to hit the car, when it hit the car, it felt like a jolt of electricity went through my whole body, and it just disappeared. I didn't stop. I just kept going. I wasn't going to stop. I had my kids with me, and they were asleep, and I wasn't going to risk that. And then, when I got home the next day, I checked, and there was no damage to the car or anything. So what was it? It was a huge black thing. That's the best way I can describe it.
That's crazy. How far away from your house were you when you had that encounter?
That's in the next county north from where I live. So, I mean, it's probably 40 minutes, between 30 and 40 minutes from that intersection of my house.
Yeah, that's really close. That's too close for comfort. When you said you saw this thing running on 2 legs, and were you able to get any kind of detail at all of this creature, or was it just too black? Was it just solid black?
It wasn't solid. You could see the legs moving, and it looked like large dog legs, but I couldn't make anything out from the waist up. It was just solid, like a black mass. And at first, for the longest time, I'm like, oh, it was a demon. That's what I thought. But now, after I've had this other encounter, it can't be. There's no way.
Well, it's definitely one of those things that leaves you scratching your head. And I know that's a brief encounter, but that's a really traumatizing encounter, especially with your kids in the car. And I mean, I would have kept going too. How did that encounter, I know we got this other one to go into, but how did that encounter affect your life after that?
I didn't like going out at night for a long time. I was trying to find myself because of the situation I was in, and I just didn't want to risk harm to my kids, since they were so little. I didn't care about myself at that point. It was my kids that I was so worried about. What if they would have woken up and they had seen the same thing? And it would have, traumatized them for forever, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I got a friend of mine that has had several encounters with what he thinks is a Dogman, and really close to a graveyard, kind of the same thing you're telling me. But the last time he saw this thing, he said it reached inside the cab of his truck, and his wife was with him, and it absolutely just terrified them, obviously, right? Like, it's taken her months and months and months to kind of get to the point where she'll even go outside. So that's a pretty common feeling. And it's another thing that there generally seem to be around graveyards for some reason. I don't know why that is, but so tell me about this other encounter you've recently had. Kind of walk us through that.
Okay. It was July 10th. I was leaving for work really early because I had to go 2 hours to another store into South Dakota. So I was leaving the house a little after 5. And I pull out of the driveway, I'm going west. And from the point from where I saw this thing from my house is 2.8 miles from my driveway to this next county intersection where I saw this. When I was driving, I looked out my passenger window because I saw something coming out of the ditch. Well, it came up out of the ditch, and then so I'm driving, and it came up like this, and it was right next to my car. And it looked into my window, and it had like short gray fur. It was running on 4 legs. It had piercing like blue-gray eyes, but then they changed colors. So it changed from blue-gray to amber. And then it showed me its teeth, and I wasn't scared. I was just trying to figure out. It's 5:13 in the morning. I'm driving 53 miles an hour because it was still dark. So I was, checking for deer and everything else. But it was keeping up with my car. So I obviously know it wasn't a deer. And a couple days later, my husband and I are watching a movie, and I saw the thing on the TV and it showed its teeth, and I said, "Oh, S." That's the teeth that I saw. But it was the scarecrow from Jeepers Creepers, so it was the teeth that the scarecrow showed that this creature had.
I don't know what you're supposed to do with this stuff. That's really scary. I mean, that's extremely scary. And what other details were you able to get? Did it look at all like the first creature you saw? Do you think they're connected?
No, nope. It was completely different. I saw all the features of this one. And the way I described it, like the size was a striped hyena. Not a spotted one, because those ones are smaller, but the big ones. That's the size. It was built. It had large muscles. The back didn't dip down, but I didn't check to see if it was a tail. I just kept going. I'm not going to stop and take a picture. But it was huge.
That's a smart move. You don't stop with that kind of stuff. Yeah. How far and how long did it run next to you? Do you recall how long that lasted?
Man, it felt like time slowed down. And I was like, oh, it could have been like 10 seconds. No, it was like 2 or 3 seconds. And it just stared in the window the whole time and then backed off, and I didn't see it after that.
A lot of times people describe these things as fear eaters, and obviously that's probably why, because it literally can just thrive and live off of fear, because I think that's what it's trying to do. When this thing looked at you, what kind of emotions were you feeling? Did you feel anything other than just like the tangible fear that you would expect to fear? Was there any kind of other emotions or feelings that happened?
I was just like, what is this? I wasn't even fully awake yet. And I'm just trying to, I'm like, okay, what am I seeing? This is not a dog. It's not a deer. Iowa obviously doesn't have a hyena. Not a bobcat, because those are much smaller. Definitely not a cougar. Haven't seen one of them in a while, So, I mean, and what creature is going to have scarecrow, jeepers, creepers teeth? Or having changing colored eyes.
That's really, really strange. Is there any graveyards close to your house or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, there is. Literally, like, I could spit at the graveyard next door. It's a quarter mile away.
I think you definitely saw a Dogman, for sure. They seem to have the same MO, and they seem to do the same things. I've heard multiple encounters where these things will pace cars. Just get close enough where they could reach in the car and grab you, but they don't, or they'll just...
Yeah, I'm sure this one could if my window was down, because it was right there. My window was up. I wasn't going to reach in.
I personally think you're really fortunate to be here to share those encounters. I mean, I don't know. Bigfoot is one thing, and you can speculate on what those are. Dogman's a completely different thing. And, in my opinion, I think they're pure demonic. They're evil. I don't know of anybody who's been like, oh, I've had a great Dogman encounter. You never hear that. It's always based around fear and these things just scaring you half to death. But since that encounter, have you guys seen anything or heard anything strange?
My 11-year-old son had some weird happen. I can't remember. I think it was before this last encounter, but he went out at night to put my birds in the coop, and he's fearless. He's a kid that would go on an upside-down roller coaster, and, he's almost 5 foot tall, so this thing that he saw outside, well, first he comes tearing back in the house, and he goes, Mom, I can't do it. There's something outside with glowing eyes. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, it's almost up to his chest, how tall it was. And then he couldn't do it. He couldn't put the birds up. So my husband had to go out there and put the birds away.
I don't blame him. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to either. That's really scary, especially for a kid to see something like that. These things have a tendency, not to try to scare you or whatever, but they do have a tendency to follow people home. I know of multiple people that have had one encounter and then they show up, close to their home. There was a guy who came on my show early on, and he was from Mississippi, and he was on the Natchez Trace. I butchered that, but the Natchez Trace. And he said he was driving. He was in the military, and he was driving, and he saw what he thought was a big cow, and then it stood up on two legs, and it grabbed this tree, and it pulled itself up, and it was a Dogman. And it had, big teeth, the whole thing, kind of like what you're describing. But what's strange is he said he came back after he'd spent, I think he was gone 3 weeks or 2 weeks, something like that. Came back home, and he said that it was about midnight, went to lay down, and he heard something breathing outside of his window. He could hear it crunching in the field, and he knew it was the same creature. But he got up the next day, and he said that his grandpa was living with him, and he stayed up late at night because he was sick. And he said he saw something pacing, a black figure pacing around the outside of their house. But what's crazy about that is his dad called him that morning and said, hey, are you okay? He said, because God woke me up at about 11:30 last night and told me to pray for you. And that's right when he had that encounter. And, I could go on and on about the different ones that have been sent to me where that kind of stuff happens. With having two of these encounters, nobody really knows, but what do you think these things are?
Something that doesn't need to be here. Just, it's not of this earth.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, I think that's probably a something that does not need to be here is one of the best ways to describe something like that. And it definitely changes your perspective on the world and the way that you look at the world. Now, going back to your original encounter, when you said this thing, you felt like it hit the car and it just kind of vanished. Describe that feeling that you had. It was kind of an electric type shock, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, through my whole body. If my chest got tight, I couldn't breathe. My whole body hurt. It took me 10 minutes just to, get feeling back in my hands. But it just made me feel sick.
I don't know if you're familiar with Martin Groves and Daryl Denton, but I had Daryl Denton on the show several times. But he came on the show and described an encounter that him and Martin Groves had in the LBL. And when he saw this creature, he said that Martin got extremely, extremely sick, kind of like what they would describe called being zapped. And that sounds what it sounds like that happened to you. And it's definitely a feeling that I've never experienced it, but they say you don't forget. But, I know you told me that you had another type of encounter with a possible guardian angel. I would love to hear that if you're open to talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. So it would have been December of 2011. I was 19 and I was in college. I was driving to my night class up into a more northern part of Iowa. So it was dark outside. It's almost 6:30. And the road is very windy. It's very curvy. And on one side, it's like they had to cut out the hill. So it's, got the hill on one side, and then there's a giant ravine, I guess, on the other. And I ended up losing control of my car. And I started going down into this ravine. And I don't know if this voice was in my head or if it was in my car, but it said, "If you don't turn the wheel, you're going to die." So I turned my steering wheel and I bounced off 3 trees. And as soon as my car stopped, there was almost immediately, there was almost somebody at my driver's door. And he looked like he had just gotten off of basketball practice. He was wearing basketball shorts, a zip-up jacket. He had shaggy blonde hair, blue eyes. He opens my car door and he grabs my hand and he says, "Chelsea, my name is Sam and I'm here to help." I never told him my name at all. He held my hand the whole time. And I remember that when the ambulance came and they got me on the backboard, he helped them carry me up to the ambulance and put me in the ambulance. And they kept asking, "Who is that? Who's that kid? Who's that kid?" They said, "We don't know who you're talking about. There is nobody else there. There's nobody else that looked like that, or, there was nobody else there. It was just us." There was only one other person that saw him, and that was a girl named Megan, and she is very, very spiritual. She always talks to me about, going to church, taking her kids to church. And she watched him walk down the road, and he just disappeared.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing something so personal, and that definitely had a huge impact on you. You can tell, and you definitely saw an angel that night. God must have some pretty big plans for you. You're still here, so I think that's amazing, and I really appreciate you sharing that. I talk about it all the time. There's a lot of things in God's universe we don't understand, and you showed both sides of it. You showed a side of things that does not bring you peace, and the side of things that do.
I question my religion all the time. There's a lot of things that from the church that I grew up in, I don't believe it. They've taught out of books that I don't believe in, and I tend to stay away from that. I believe that there's something. I just have to figure out what it is myself.
Well, I will tell you this: you definitely saw an angel that night, and God was definitely with you. So you keep listening to that voice, because that's you can never go wrong by listening to that, and that's an amazing, very personal thing. And I really do appreciate you sharing that, and sharing these other encounters with my audience. And if something else happens in the future, I definitely would love to hear about it.
Yeah, of course.
Once you know that these things are real and they're out there, it changes your whole perspective, not just on the woods, but on life. And it takes a lot of guts for people to come forward and share these encounters. And I'm very grateful that people trust me with their encounters. I always want this to be a safe place for people to come and share this stuff, because it's extremely traumatizing. And I really do hope that by giving people these platforms that they're able to heal in some small way and get this off their chest. There's something very healing about being able to share these encounters and knowing that you're not alone. But none of that would happen without y'all. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and for listening and watching and commenting. It means more to me than you know. It means a lot to the people sharing these stories. And if you want to help this channel, please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about it. I'm so grateful to be able to sit in this chair and hear these encounters, and just to be able to make the connections that we're making and grow this community. It means a lot to me and my family, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And I did notice that like 60-something% of you guys that watch this podcast are not subscribed. So if you could just subscribe and hit the button, that would mean a lot to me. Help this channel continue to grow so the word gets out there. I'm just grateful to be able to sit here. I'm grateful for you guys. Thank you for being part of Mysteries Unknown. You know I'm going to say it, especially after an episode like tonight. Stay prayed up. We'll see you in the next episode.